Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome, welcome, my sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we're going to have a very interesting conversation called Chances Are You Dated a Sociopath. This was inspired by the show last week where that came up in conversation. So one of the things that I've noticed more and more is there is a lack of feeling in people. And I think in a lot of times in my life, I didn't really want to see it, so I couldn't acknowledge it. But I'm starting to see it now. I even see it in kids, and I wonder, like, wow, are we like raising a generation of sociopaths? Maybe, maybe not. But one of the things I do know is that through research that I've looked at is that 1 in 4 people are on that kind of spectrum of sociopaths. So there are definitions in the DSM-4 for antisocial personality disorder, and we will talk about those because if you've ever wondered if you're a sociopath, well, we can look at some things so you can see, like, is this something going on for you? Now, the other chances is that if you are a sociopath, you probably care so much. Chances are, if you're a sociopath, you don't care that you are one. That if you think you are a sociopath, the chances are you're not one, because you actually care about people and humanity so much that you're concerned you might hurt them, but in fact, you are actually not a sociopath. It's kind of backwards. So there are many signs to know, like, what qualifies a person as a sociopath, so you can know whether you've dated one or not. And what qualifies me to talk about this is that I actually studied psychology in university. I have a BA in psych. I've worked with people for years in terms of coaching and different healing modalities. I also have I'm also a sex and intimacy coach and a relationship coach. So I have worked with people in their relationships, especially assisting people getting out of things like relationships with sociopaths, but also on developing deeper sense of intimacy with partners. So it's a thing that is, prominent, and you've probably read it. You've probably read it in social media, on posts where people talk about sociopaths. I could tell you that every day I go on to social media, and it could be the circles I, fall into, but every day I go onto social media, I see somebody posting something about sociopaths, narcissists, and I mean, there's a difference. We're not talking about narcissists today. We're talking about people who are sociopaths who actually have what would qualify as the antisocial personality disorder, APD. And it is prominent, right? Like I was saying, that the research shows that 1 in 4 people actually have an antisocial personality disorder. Now, when I look at this list, I know that I actually have some of these qualities. Like, I'm a risk taker, and I am, what else? Impulsive. So those are 2 of 10 things that would be on the list, right? So, we all have probably some degree of something that shows up, and it's not about diagnosing yourself. And I bet, if you're listening, you'll probably identify with some of these things as well. And this is not about placing blame or anything. The reason I am choosing to do a show about this is because so many people are in relationships with sociopaths and don't know how to get out, and they find it incredibly stressful. And then when they do get out, they've been so messed up by the relationship, they don't actually think they're lovable or can move on or ever have a life. And speaking from a person who, from my life, my own personal experience, I know that you can actually move into having relationships beyond sociopaths, and they can be incredible relationships, kind and loving and caring relationships with people who are not sociopaths. So it's just a matter of finding that 1 in 4 who are not. And, men are sociopaths, women are sociopaths. It's irrelevant what your gender is. There are sociopaths on the entire gender spectrum. So when we talk about 1 in 4 people, you're going to be looking at the entire gender spectrum. So a few things to look at to know, how do you know if you are a sociopath? The first thing to look at is, do you spend a lot of your time lying about everything? Like everything. Like, hey, where did you go? And you have to just feel compelled to lie about it, even if it was just like, I just went to the grocery store. But instead you're like, I went here and then I went and I didn't go anywhere. What are you talking about? You're crazy. I don't know what you mean that I went somewhere. So a lot of the lies will be from a sociopath will be to make the other person feel crazy. So the sociopath lies in order to make the person feel crazy, right? So it's a very kind of frustrating energy to be in or with when you are constantly feeling like you're crazy. So you're like, wow, am I being lied to? Oh, well, they said they're not lying. They said they're not, so they must not be, right? And you start to distrust yourself, and you start to buy into and favor whatever the other is telling you. And I think some of you out there might be listening and wondering, why would somebody do that? Like, why would somebody give up their beliefs, give up their intuition, give up whatever they know to be true? Now, this doesn't happen overnight, right? The first time you hear the lie, you're like, well, that's a lie. And you feel confident that you know it's a lie. But because they have some other traits like manipulation, you get convinced to go back. Now, again, what would have you do that? Usually, a person that is in a relationship with a sociopath has very low self-esteem. And sociopaths know this, and they seek you out. They seek you out to use you and abuse you, and that makes it easier. If you are a confident person and you have high self-esteem, the chances are that you fall for a sociopath are a lot lower than if you have low self-esteem, have been in abusive situations, have been abused in any way, or neglected. If you've been abused, neglected, or whether it's sexually, physically, or any of that abuse, the chances are you will have a much higher chance of attracting a sociopath and falling for whatever they say, because your self-esteem and all of these other things you've already felt broken. And in your feeling of being broken, it's almost, until you've healed that, it's almost impossible for you not to trust somebody else more than yourself, because everything that probably occurred that led to the abuse was that you feel now that you don't trust anything, including yourself, right? So to get out of that, one of those things is to start building your own trust again. So all of these things will have their polarizing side to that. So if somebody lies a lot and they're dishonest, then the thing that you want to do to build your self-esteem to get out is start to find things that you can prove to yourself that you know are true. And you can start with simple things like, do you know what your own name is? And you can be like, my name is, like, for example, for me, my name is Milica Jelenic. Do I know that to be true? Yeah, Because you know what? I've actually met people who, when I ask them that question, they're like, I don't really know anymore. They've lost so much of themselves that they aren't even sure of their name anymore. It's gone that far. So start simple. Do you know what your name is? Do you know what your address is? Do you know the name of your parents? Do you know the name of your siblings? Do you know the name of your pets? Things that you can absolutely say that you know to be true. So for the people out there who don't even know is your own name correct, because you've been so messed in the head that you don't even know who you are anymore, try and find some identification for yourself, whether that's looking at a driver's license or a passport or something that has a picture of you that you can look at and identify as you. Maybe if you're lucky, you have somebody in your life who can look at you and say, I know who you are, and this is what your name is, and I know who you are. And they can start to begin to help you through the recovery of the lies that you've bought that have misguided you and misplaced all of your trust. Instead of having it in yourself and your own knowing, you've placed it into other people who are not reliable and tend to be dishonest and liars. It's a big energy for people to take on, is to take on the lies of other people. And it can be very masking to who you are as a person, and it can be very masking to your identity, the things you love, the relationships that you like as well. It's a very confusing energy to be in. Most people in general, we'll say the 75%, because we're looking at 1 in 4 could actually have antisocial personality disorder. So 3 out of 4 tend to have a moral sense of wanting to say things. And then there's a level where you need to look at, is this kind? Some things are not kind to say. Now, a sociopath might say things or tell a lie even that isn't even close to true, or tell a truth just to be hurtful. So see what is there, because there are some people who just intentionally want to hurt people, and whether that's telling a lie to hurt them or telling a false truth to hurt them is one way that people do that. I did once years ago have a client that completely lied to his wife about something, and it was fascinating. And I called him out, and I'm like, you know what, you're just cruel. For one, you're being cruel to hurt your wife for no reason. I never saw him again after that, after I called him out on it, because sociopaths actually don't like being called out on it. So you can call sociopaths out on their stuff and go, you know what, you're cruel and I'm not interested. However, sometimes if you've been in a relationship with a sociopath, you don't have the backbone or strength to do that yet. So you got to build up your trust in yourself. And if you really don't know how to, I would love to connect with you, because it's something that I worked on myself for many years to figure out, and how to be strengthened, and then how to invite people in my life, into my life, that weren't sociopaths, which was fascinating to like seek out non-sociopaths after being involved with one for a very long time. So the one thing that you got to look at is, are they constantly being dishonest with you? The people who have antisocial personality disorder lie about everything all the time. Have you been drinking? No. Did you do this? No, that wasn't me. They will make stuff up that is unfreaking believable. So a lot of times there is even substance abuse that goes along with antisocial personality disorder. So there's usually a lying about those things, or lying about why they didn't fulfill a promise, like, I'll pick your daughter up after school, or our daughter up after school, but then they don't, because they're a liar and they're irresponsible. So those are things that will occur, and it is because that is who they are. So if you can actually see somebody with antisocial personality disorder, also known as a sociopath, coming from a mile away. You can either choose to be in that or not be in that. But until you are willing to really have the confidence to stand up for yourself, I would recommend just kind of pulling back out of relationships for a while until you have that strength. Otherwise, you could very easily land yourself in a relationship with a sociopath. And it's a heck of a lot harder to get out of one of those relationships when you don't have the confidence or the strength than it is to not even get in one to begin with, right? So we're on the first, holy cow, who knew this was going to be such a conversation? We're only on the very first of 10 signs to look for an antisocial personality disorder. I will get through all of these in this show, so stick with me. We're going to head to our first commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email becomeahost@inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to The Pleasure Zone, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we are having a very long overdue discussion about, do you know you might be in a relationship with a sociopath? Chances are you've had a relationship with a sociopath. Why do I say the chances are that? Because from what I've read in studies, 1 in 4 people have antisocial personality disorder to some degree. So to some degree, we all probably have some of these things, but I would say, most business owners that I know are risk takers. So that's one quality in antisocial personality disorder. There is, consideration in certain risks that you need to look at, right? So it's a matter of looking at it from a different lens. Like, does this person have the majority of their traits that lie into the categories that I'm talking about tonight? The different qualities that I'm talking about tonight. And if they have the majority of these traits, it's really something to think about. And, if you like being in a relationship with a sociopath, keep choosing it. I'm not telling you you can't be, that's your choice. If you'd like to get out of the relationship with a sociopath and you don't know how, I would love for you to connect with me. I have some experience with getting out of them, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. As I'm talking about the traits of the sociopath today, I'm also going to give you some tips and tools on how to be able to strengthen yourself so that you can get out. So, for example, the first one was about dishonesty and lies, and one of the things we can do to stop breaking the trance of being in the lies. And I call it a trance because it's like you get brainwashed by hearing the lies over and over again, and you don't know what's real anymore. And the thing that you can do to kind of break that trance is to start trusting you, the simple things like, do you know what your name is? Do you know what your address is? Can you trust that? Can you trust yourself to walk across the street and not get hit by a car? Simple things, right? We want to look at simple things to start developing the trust in yourself again. And if some of you might be listening and going, that's silly, I get that might be silly for you, and that's cool. I've actually worked with people who are at that level where they are so like lost and confused that they really don't know what their name is anymore. Is that really their name, or are they losing their mind? Because some sociopaths are masterful in convincing you into a lot of things if you are susceptible to believe them. And the reasons you might be susceptible are that you have not healed certain things like past traumas, abuses, sexual or emotional, otherwise physical. And there is a trauma that is still running your life, and there is a feeling of desire to have closeness or connection with people, and there is no understanding of what is a healthy, happy relationship, likely because you've never experienced that, or you yourself don't even understand what or how to receive love. And if you don't know what way you receive love, then people will throw things at you and you think, oh, that's love because they say it is. So know yourself. The more you know you, the more confidence you have, the more the sociopaths can't get through the door. Cool? Okay, so we talked about lies in the first segment, and we do have another 9 to get through. So I'm going to jump through these so that we can get through them. The second one is manipulation. And manipulation can occur in so many different ways. You'll see children manipulate all the time with smiles, with giggles, with different words. You know, everybody does manipulate. What we're talking about is manipulation that is intended to harm another person. I personally manipulate people, absolutely, in my work. I manipulate bodies by movement. That's the type of manipulation. And also manipulating people into greatness by having them look at what it is that's blocking them or stopping them from their greatness. All of that can be considered a manipulation. And what I'm talking about here is somebody that's actually trying to have you think less of yourself and not like yourself, or like them more, choose them in favor of you. And manipulation for the total annihilation of the other person's personality and self, right? So it's really a massive abuse, this manipulation. It's a little different. Sometimes there's things like emotional blackmail involved. And emotional blackmail can come in so many ways. It can be like, well, if you don't do what I say, then I'm going to hurt so-and-so or hurt so-and-so. I'm giving that one as an example because that was one that was used. That was a tactic that somebody tried to use with me. And luckily, the threats that were being posed, I told the people who were having the threats posed on them, and they were like, oh yeah, forget this person's going down. So they backed me, which was nice, and they backed themselves. So the two people who are being threatened are not sociopaths, and they were like, doesn't matter what that person does, they're going down. So don't listen to them and don't buy that and don't keep going back because you feel sorry and you don't want us to get hurt. And that was a big factor for me because the two people who were being threatened are people I love dearly, and I did not want them to get hurt. So emotional blackmail is one of those things that people will use. You know, this partly came up because last week we were talking about guilt, and guilt can be a bit of an emotional blackmailing way of dealing with things as well. If you don't do this, this will happen, or make you feel bad about stuff. So emotional blackmail is like vomit in my mouth, and it's disgusting. So if you're into emotional blackmail, go find somebody else. And you know, maybe what if just like sociopaths could get together and they could just enjoy each other's sociopathic behaviors and, you know, drowned in each other's manipulations? That'd be great. So the question is, how do you deal with a manipulator? So number one, call them out on manipulation if you can. You don't have to say it out loud. just notice when it's happening. Because if you're willing to just go, oh yeah, I see that you're manipulating me. If you say it out loud, sometimes that will anger them. And because they can be prone to violence and hostility and aggression, you don't want to aggravate the sociopath. So acknowledge it for you. Then ask this timely question, which is, how can I out-manipulate this manipulator? And darlings, it took me a while, but I did figure a way, and I'm not going to say it on this radio show because I don't want it to be out there in the public of what I did to out-manipulate a manipulator. But I would be happy to share it with you privately if you are calling me for a session. I'm happy to share with you what I did to out-manipulate the manipulator. It was actually quite simple, and nobody got physically harmed, and it switched the energy. So be willing to out-manipulate the manipulator, and for everybody that may come across differently. Now, it was funny because when I got in relationship with my husband, and I don't know, one night I cried about something, and I didn't realize at the time I was doing it because I'd been in such a habit of crying out of manipulation since I was like 3 or 4 years old. And my husband called me on it. He's like, okay, so are you done crying? I'm not buying your story. You're not pathetic, and you're not this, and you're not that. So stop lying about all these things that you think you're saying. I'm not gonna toot your horn, and I'm not gonna put you down. You need to get through this. And he's got this like crazy ability to be like total space and this crazy support system without actually like tooting my horn or trying to make me feel good, and also not putting me down. He's just there, and so I like love that quality about him. And yeah, and he just was like space, and he's like, so are you done trying to manipulate me with crying? And I was like, fuck, that's what I was doing. And he called me on it, which was great, and I love that. And so now I don't have to do that anymore, because that used to be like a pattern I had that I learned from other sociopaths in my life. So that was the other thing I wanted to say is, not all people are born sociopaths, but if you're raised by one, you might take on their personality traits, right? So my dad seems to have about half of these qualities, and all the things that he did are things that I mimicked. Like manipulation was one of them, so I mimicked that. And his manipulation was through sadness and tears, and I was like, hey, that seems to work on me, I'll use it on others. It was not a conscious choice as a child of like 3 years old, but I saw it work, and so I tried it, and it worked for a really long time, and then it didn't, and that was cool that I got to change that and look at other ways, like what other ways are ways that you can out manipulate a manipulator. So it's a bit crazy, but it's something that's totally viable. Another thing that you might find is big on the list for antisocial personality disorder or sociopaths is that they tend to be lawbreakers. So they'll do things like they love to go on the edge of, breaking the law, whether that's having weapons illegally, or whether that's having, selling drugs, or, whatever you can think of that would get them in trouble and possibly get them in jail. That turns them on to no end, because they pretty much love sticking it to authority. I have to say that there are times where I like want to stick it to authority when authority is being completely non-reasonable, and like creating rules that are insane. I get that. And then there are some other ones it's like, whatevs. So a lot of people consider breaking the law as something you don't really want to do because it's a hassle. But people with antisocial personality disorder often don't even give a crap. So I also need you to get the difference between, there are people who know the law and know how to work it, and then there are people who blatantly are just jerks about everything, right? So if you know the law and how to work it, you can work within true laws, and it's very complex, but it's it's something that where a person who has the antisocial personality disorder, If they shoot somebody, they don't care. If they steal, they don't care. These are things to me that are like crimes against people. These go against natural law. And anti-personality disorder complex usually has people not even care about what would be natural law, would be like looking after humanity, would be like everybody is looked after, everybody has, you have your stuff, they have their stuff, you don't steal, you don't murder. Those are kind of like the top two things in natural law. Kindness is, kind of like an umbrella of the energy of it. So when people can't do kindness and they have to do something that's harmful, hurtful, especially if it's emotionally harmful or hurtful, or physically harmful or hurtful, and they get off on it and they think it's great and they have zero remorse, yeah, you got a little bit of sociopath going on there. So that's another thing to consider. So risk taking is another one, like speeding, and like you'll probably see these people on the roads a lot, where they're speeding in ways that they're like zooming through traffic and they're almost hitting other cars. They don't even look. They have zero regard for other people's lives. And, whether it's in business where they just jump at an opportunity, spend all their money and everybody else's, even doing things like getting people to be involved in what are those things called? Like scams, they wouldn't care that they scammed people. It doesn't even affect them. They wouldn't even flinch that they've hurt people or many people's lives or their income or like their entire livelihood. They wouldn't care because it's all about what they get out of it. So the idea for them is they don't really care about the risk, regardless of how small the reward might be. They just need to take more risks and more risks and more risks, especially if it involves getting in trouble. They love that and they want more of it. I think some of you now are hearing this and going, holy crap nuts, I know a lot of sociopaths. So we're going to come back and talk about the other parts of sociopaths, the other elements, and how to get out of it. The law breaking is, if a person is breaking the law and you're in a relationship with them, call the police. That's one way to get them to stop. If they're risk taking, then, you can, if you're sharing things like credit cards or whatever, cut them off. Because usually they're so irresponsible that they've not even been able to be the primary owner of like a thing like a credit card. So cut them off. That's not always the case, but anyways, there's ways to cut them off from risk taking as well. So, and not to be involved in their risks. So don't buy into their risks. Like if they're trying to get you involved, see that it's a risk. Don't give them money to like an investment that would take away everything that you have. Think. You need to stop and think. If they've threatened you to say, if you don't do this and we're broken up, cool. Take a deep breath, build that confidence, give me a call. We're going to get you through it, but do not give them money and walk away. Okay, so we're going to come up to our next commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. So tonight we're talking about chances are you dated a sociopath. Why? Because 1 in 4 people have actually been categorized as sociopaths. So isn't that fascinating? So when we look at the next categories, we're going to be looking at things like people having no remorse for their actions, which I talked a little bit about with the risk taking, because they'll take a risk and then they don't care about the actions or how that might affect other people. So having no remorse means you do not feel or care at all about how you're affecting another person. And the thing is that as a society, we've actually had to care about others in order to sustain our society. We've had to care about certain things, even if certain societies have different rules or regulations that they've created, and spoken or unspoken. It's that when you're working within a community or a society, you have an understanding of what those kind of regulations and rules are. And yes, sometimes they change as well. But to be able to function in society, you cannot have a blatant disregard for everything that society is saying. And that society cannot have a blatant disregard for the people in it either. So that's a whole other topic where societies can be almost sociopathic in their behavior as well. We have a few societies on the planet right now during COVID that are, what if they were people, I would say they were sociopaths. So it's they actually have every single category going that has to do with sociopathic behavior. So it's fascinating for me to watch this. When you study psychology and then you look at things from a sociological perspective, it's like, wow, look at that. Countries are like sociopaths. Or is it the leaders who are leading them who are doing things like breaking the law, manipulating, risk-taking with the people in the country, having zero remorse for the risk-taking, being totally irresponsible with things like, checking up on certain standards, actually inciting and creating a need for substance abuse of different kinds, and then creating unhealthy or creating a situation where nobody's got healthy relationships. Like, I'm just thinking most of the world during COVID has been ruled by leaders who are total sociopaths. Just saying, that's just my interesting point of view. So when we look at the next levels, like no remorse, people don't care that they've hurt people. You'll see it. I bet if you look at some leaders in the world right now, you'll go, there's a sociopath. They have no remorse for what they've done, for the lies they've perpetrated, for what they've put on their people. No remorse. So yeah, it's vomit. It's all vomit. And really, a lot of people tend to, with antisocial personality disorder, tend to feel zero remorse for their actions at all. They'll harm people and they'll justify it. They'll just say why they should have. and they'll justify it and they'll explain why it works. And then they usually have a gain from it, whether it's financial or support in other ways. You'll get something from it always. And always their only concern is what they gain from it, how their well-being is connected to it, not other people. So sociopaths, what do? They only care about themselves. And you can tell when somebody only cares about themselves because they really do have no remorse. And the sad thing is I'm seeing it in children, and it makes me so sad. It doesn't make me sad. I am sad about it, that I see children who have no remorse, whether they've hurt an animal or whether they've hurt another child or even an adult. And they're just like, I don't care. Like, how are there so many children out there right now who say things like, I don't care, and they truly mean it? And there are some who say, I don't care, but you can actually feel in them that they're sad. They're more rare. There are so many who are like, I don't care, and they mean it, and they're malicious, and they have this energy behind them. And I know that they have a sociopathic tendency because it's like I have an instinct that I want to slap them out of it. I don't, but I have this underlying thing to like wake them up and go, what the hell has happened? So it's frightening to me. Here, so the next one is being irresponsible, where you tend to blame others for everything. It's your fault I drank. It's your fault I did this. It's your fault I didn't do this. It's your fault. It's your fault. It's your. They never take responsibility. Why? Because they have antisocial personality disorder. So it's kind of unfun, really, to be around somebody who's forever blaming you and they never take personal responsibility for anything because it's not their problem and everybody else's problem. It's the police who did it. It's my boss who did it. It's you who did it. It's the kid who did it. It's everybody else's fault but theirs. And what they can do is they usually do this in a way, they're so irresponsible, they tend to lose jobs, they can't stick to anything very long because they're so irresponsible. They tend to have to do things on the side hustle to try and, generate money. So they tend to go to things that are illegal. They have to do things that are illegal in order to get by. So they got to sell drugs or they got to do anything crime related because they also want to say screw you to the authorities. And they don't really ever care to have anything that's like make an honest day's work. Their main thing is, how can I screw people over as fast as possible and get the gain I want as fast as possible? They're never in their question of their reality is what contribution can we all be to the planet, and what can I be for you, and how can I contribute to you? They would never even consider you. You're not even in there. So if you feel like you are not even in the relationship because the person doesn't ever think about you or care about you, you might be with a sociopath. So how do you turn around the people who are irresponsible? Well, you know what? You'll never convince them that they are responsible for their choices. All you can really do is recognize that what you're responsible for is the choice to keep being in the relationship. And then when you choose to be responsible for your choice and go, okay, I am choosing this relationship, and now I choose out. Once you get that you can choose out and you can take responsibility for your actions that got you in there to begin with, and you can start getting that greater and greater sense of self-esteem and be personally responsible for your own stuff. Because a lot of people who are in relationships with sociopaths forget that they actually somewhere along the way chose to be in it. This isn't the same as like if somebody has abducted you, right? This is not the same thing. This is somebody approached you, you got convinced because you had both different things going on, abuses that have not been resolved, and then you chose to go into this. So recognize what you chose and choose something different. That is it. That is as simple as it gets. That's your way to get out of somebody being irresponsible, is to see where you chose something and take responsibility, and then choose something different. Another one is substance abuse, which is pretty self-defining. It's like the abuse of alcohol, drugs. Other substances can come in there, whether it's medications from doctors or whether it's medications from a drug dealer or drugs from a drug dealer, it's kind of irrelevant. Those substance abuses are pretty high on the list of sociopaths because those addictions take over their lives, and the addiction is more important than anybody else. So the drinking is more important, and yeah, some other things are more important. Now, it's rare, really rare, that a sociopath has some kind of turnaround in their life and they would like to change it, because usually they don't want to because they're not responsible. But it does happen on a very, very rare occasion. I'm saying that that's rare because I've only seen it once, and I haven't heard of it very often. So it's more common than it to be that they don't want to do that. So a lot of these qualities you're going to hear today, and that you've heard today, also go along with people who are addicts. And addiction is not the same as an antisocial personality disorder, even though there are some different qualities that come along. Some people who are addicts or have been abusing substances do have remorse. They do sometimes turn around and take responsibility. They do start to tell the truth. That again is not, it's not, maybe 20 or 30 or 40% of people who go in to try and stop addiction have those kinds of great results. I don't really know the stats on that. I know it's not that high, but it does happen. So substance abuse of any kind, that would be part of it too. Why? Because it's all about saying screw you to everybody else, and it's all about them. It's all about what they want, how they want it, and how they can get it as fast as possible. So it's I'm sure by now some of you are like, holy cow, this seems so common. Seems to be things I see in people everywhere. So some people can do drugs in moderation, but some people cannot. They have to abuse alcohol, drugs. They have no self-control. And that substance abuse will just exacerbate things. It'll exacerbate all the other stuff, like the lying and the financial stuff with risk taking and all that jazz. So it's an ugly situation. So we've got a few more things to talk about, which we will get to. You are listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercials.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. So tonight we've been talking about chances are you've dated a sociopath. We're looking at qualities of sociopaths, and then I'm giving you some clues on like what you can do to get out of that. So just before break, one of the things we're talking about was substance abuse. Now, in order for you to be able to know that the person's an abuser, like one of the things with addiction is to recognize that there's a problem, that the person is an addict. If you're in denial, that's a huge issue. So number one for that one with substance abuse is recognize that this person is actually an addict. And if you don't know if this person is an addict, you can always look up traits of addiction. There are several. Places like AA and Al-Anon will also have them listed so that you can kind of get whether the person. Al-Anon is great for family support and family and friends, and it's one of those ones that it does give you kind of a list and an understanding of what to do and how to deal with an addict. That's one of the most common ones to go to with the Al-Anon. There are lots of other support groups that are not organized, just people getting together to talk, and that can be helpful. If you are in a relationship with somebody that's an addict, having a support system is a fantastic way to help you through the day, and they often have great tips and tools on how to get through the day and also how to get out of the relationship with an addict. So that's helpful to know. And then unhealthy relationships, well, all these things cause unhealthy relationships in general, but one of the things that I found was that part of the unhealthy relationships is that maybe they don't talk to any of their family anymore. They have little to no friends. People generally don't like them because instinctively they're turned off by them. They fight with everybody they know. So those are all things to look out for too. Like if they're like, my family doesn't talk to me, I'm so alone in the world. Okay, so why is that? Like, what did you create to have nobody talk to you? Or what did you create to have, people like avoiding you or whatever? So the lies, manipulation, all those things can cause a strain on relationship, along with the abuse, drug abuse, and the irresponsibility and the lack of remorse. Like all of these things can add up to, sociopaths having unhealthy relationships, and very rarely can they actually have relationships that are with any substance. I don't know that they can have relationships with substance, but I'm saying that maybe there's a chance that somebody could. So usually there's also abuse involved too, like physical or emotional, and so that's a problem as well. So if you've been physically abused or emotionally abused, the person might be a sociopath. Look at some of these other qualities. But I beg you, just get out. Get out before it gets worse. If you don't know where to go, there are usually homes in your area that are abuse centers for men and women. Get out and don't go back. Don't go back no matter what. No matter what lies they tell you, before you even talk to them ever again, build your self-esteem so much that they cannot trick you. They cannot convince you, and they cannot manipulate you. Because why? They can tend to be hostile and aggressive. So that hostility and aggression, you don't want to be involved with somebody if you go back with them who may beat you up or threaten your life. And yeah, it would just be smart to not do that. So for hostility, there's another section of hostility and aggression and impulsiveness. So much to talk about, right? So hostility and aggression comes up as well with a lot of people with antisocial personality disorder. They just fight about everything and anything. Like the window's open, they fight about it. The window's not open, they fight about it. Like you can't win no matter what with a sociopath because they just want to fight about everything. It's how they relate to people is through resistance and reaction, and they just don't know how to do it otherwise. So they can also turn on the charm when they want to make you feel good about yourself, and then they can fight you constantly about nothing to make you get agitated and mad, and then they tell you you're insane because you feel insane because you're with a person who's making you feel nuts with their behavior. So they can also often be super arrogant, and they think that you have to do what they want all the time. And they can also be arrogant with the way that they talk about how great they are and never listen to anybody else because nobody else matters. So somebody talks all the freaking time and never has a moment to listen to you, not even one moment. That is a chance of somebody who is going to be a sociopath because it's all about them. Oh, it's fun, right? And they don't care if it's public or private. They just want their attention and they want to be the winner. So it can be ugly. So, oh my goodness, I have 5 seconds pretty much left of this show. Impulsivity is the way to end this too. So if they're impulsive about all their actions, that is another thing to look out for. I want to thank you guys for listening. Until next week.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.